Yeah. And all three, so every time like I get to the end of one chapter where it gets to a different timeline and I have to put the end of that timeline, but then when you keep going to the next timeline, okay. And I get mad again. There was a book I read that kind of same thing, but they were. Yeah. Yeah, I remember at some point we posted on Instagram. It's like a separate character profile and he was working on. Like even his Instagram team. Yeah. Wild. And I've been curious to know if he's never going to LA or something before, like how much of it will actually be in LA and if you have to go there or being a writer, does that mean it's gonna be? Oh, he's a writer for that? Mm-hmm. Oh my God. Yeah, he's only like contributed to like one episode each season. But are you familiar with the show? Yeah. The first one, season one, the one that we was the co-writer on with the one where the deaf characters and stuff like that. So like it's all like sign language. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it was funny when they. I ever got funny was when the dog got really bad. Like, I messaged him and was like, this dog ran out that way. Like, I'm a dog lover. Do you think I'm gonna let that happen?
Hello, welcome. I forgot to flip to the next page on my little clipboard here, so hang on one second. Okay. Hello and welcome. That's the first thing on my clipboard, so I nailed that part. My name is Amy Andrews. I'm the children's book buyer here at East City Bookshop. We are so happy that you all came out tonight, braving the rain. We appreciate that. And thank you for joining us in person and also on the live stream if you're joining us that way. We have a ton of events here at East City and book clubs as well. I would like to point out that our Wine and Angst book club, which is our adults who read young adult book club, is reading the Breakup Lists in June. So if you don't get enough conversation about the book tonight, I would definitely encourage you to come out for that one. A few housekeeping details. First of all, if you need a bathroom, it is upstairs past the cash registers and the greeting cards. If you're watching from home and experiencing any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat. My colleague Maggie is keeping an eye on that. And we will have time for questions tonight for in-person and virtual attendees. So even if you're watching via Zoom, you can't participate. Please put those questions in the Q&A feature. Maggie will see them and can ask on your behalf. And last, but most importantly, if you need to purchase a copy of the book or of Adib or Ellen's other books, we have copies available at the register, and we'd be happy to help you out with that after the event. They are all upstairs, not on the shelves. So that is where to buy after the show. I have been a huge fan of Adib's work since I first read Darius the Great is Not Okay in 2018. I just love the way he writes teen boys. He has such a strong narrative voice and such sensitive, tender relationships between friends, between families, between love interests. And I love that his characters are always, a little awkward, a little uncertain, a little messy. It just feels really real. Like that is exactly how I remember feeling when I was a teenager. So I feel like he really taps into that. The Breakup Lists has all of that and more. I was especially excited for this one because I was a theater kid. You may not know this, but there is a very strong theater kid to bookseller pipeline. We got a few in the house tonight. So a rom-com set in the world of high school theater is just always going to be a good one in my book. In the Breakup List, Jackson, our protagonist, is a lot of things, but one thing that he's not is a romantic. He's already had a front row seat to his parents' divorce, picked up the pieces of his sister Jasmine's broken heart one too many times. So he's perfectly happy living life behind the scenes, keeping his romantic exploits limited to the breakup lists that he makes for Jasmine, which chronicle every flaw, real or imagined, of her many, many exes. Enter Liam, the senior swim captain turned leading man that neither of the siblings can stop thinking about. Jackson doesn't have a crush, of course, because Jasmine is already setting her sights on him, and Liam's probably, definitely straight anyway. So why does the idea of eventually writing a breakup list for him feel so impossible? And now I want to introduce our authors this evening. First up, Ellen Oh is the author of the new young adult novel, The Colliding Worlds of Mina Lee, and an award-winning author of middle grade novels, Haru Zombie Dog Hero, Finding Jeannie Kim, Dragon Egg Princess, the Spirit Hunters trilogy, and the Prophecy series, as well as editor and contributor to several anthologies. She is a founding member of We Need Diverse Books, a nonprofit organization dedicated to increasing diversity in children's literature. Ellen lives in Rockland, Maryland with her husband, 3 human children, and 2 dog children. And finally, the man of the evening, Adib Khorram lives in Kansas City, Missouri. When he isn't writing, you can probably find him trying to get his 100-yard freestyle under a minute, learning to do a Let's Jump, or steeping a cup of oolong. His debut novel, Darius the Great Is Not Okay, earned several awards, including the William C. Morris Debut Award, the Asian Pacific American Award for Young Adult Literature, and a Boston Globe Hornbook Honor. He is also the author of Darius the Great Deserves Better, Kiss and Tell, and the picture book, 7 Special Somethings, A Naru's Story. And now, please welcome Adib and Ellen. Woo!
Thanks all for coming.
On a rainy day. It was horrendous. Turn my phone off. Yes.
Now I'm paranoid too.
So there's a virtual audience also. So are we, oh, that way. Okay. This is my bad side. I should have.
Oh no, I'm so sorry.
All right, is this on? Hello? Okay. Hello and welcome to the Breakup List, which by the way is the funniest book I have had the pleasure of reading in such a long time. I did not move. My butt was numb. It was so good. And of course, I'm gonna just jump right in because we want to talk about, you went from writing coming of age novels into writing a full-on romantic comedy. Tell us about that. What was the switch like? How, did your brain just poof when you try to do 2 very different things?
I first started working on this book in late 2021. So it was very much a product of the pandemic. And I think I'm not the only person I know that was really depressed during the pandemic and couldn't go anywhere or do anything. And I've always enjoyed rom-coms and romance in general. But during the pandemic, I started reading a lot of them. I think I read maybe 100 romances in the course of about 2 months when I was like, I'm not going to write anything. I'm just going to read about people falling in love. And I was like, oh, this does make me happy. I'm cured. But also, as so often happens, when you read a lot of books, but you don't ever get quite what you want out of them, you're like, I guess now I have to go and write one myself. And so in that sense, it was a really easy switch in that I was immersed in the genre and it's something I loved. But it was also really challenging because all of my authorial instincts, if I may sound way more impressive than I am, are about, really focusing on coming of age and character development and intricate subplots. And at every stage, my editor was like, Adib, it's a romance. The romance is the main element. You cannot have 20 subplots. You can have like 3, no more. And so it was definitely a different way of thinking about the story and about the characters. But I think I landed in a place where they still have a lot of depth to them, and there's still, you can tell that much like ducks, there's a lot going on under the surface. I just was told to kill my darlings.
All right, but speaking of darlings, did you write the characters first, or did the plot come, like, what came first?
So the characters came first. Jackson and Liam and Jackson's best friend Bowie all existed back in 2019 when I saw an article in the Kansas City Star about a town in like middle of nowhere, Kansas, where the laws were written in such a way that a teenager could run for mayor, and so a teenager was running for mayor. And I love Parks and Recreation, the sitcom.
Oh,
and
me
I was like,
too.
oh, I wonder what a YA about a Leslie Knope type character would be like. So I wrote it. Sent it off to my agent, Molly, and Molly called me and she said, how honest do you want me to be? And I said, please be honest. I'm a theater kid. I can take it. And she said, these are lovely characters to spend a novel with. It'd be nice if we could find a plot. And of course, me being me, I was like, what do you think the plot should be? She said, if I knew, I would tell you, but I don't know. I think it has to go into the drawer for a while. So these characters were sitting around in the drawer until 2.5 years later when I was like, I want to write a rom-com. Oh, I have some characters I really like. Let me stick them in a rom-com. And it worked really, really well. The plot came to me because while this was all going on, shortly before the pandemic, my sister went through a rough breakup. And to cheer her up, I did make my own lists of faults of her ex-boyfriend to make her laugh. And they were always ridiculous things that perhaps weren't actually any human could be capable of, but this one person was. And you know, she did get over it eventually, and you know, now we laugh about it. But I was describing this to one of my other friends, and she looked at me and she's like, "There's a book idea in there." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh, you're right. There is a book idea." And so it was sort of those several things all came together into the Breakup Lists.
So perfect timing. Could you give a little, I don't know if it was given already, but just in case, a little synopsis in your words about the Breakup Lists?
Yes. So the Breakup List is about Jackson Ghaznavi, who's a queer, deaf Iranian-American stage manager in his high school in Kansas City, Missouri. He's a cynic and doesn't believe in love, and his older sister, Jasmine, really does. She's constantly in and out of love, and he makes lists of all her ex-boyfriend's faults to help her get over them. However, the senior swim captain, Liam Coquette, auditions for the fall musical, gets a role, and Jackson and Liam start becoming friends. Unfortunately, Liam and Jasmine also start dating, which Jackson is fine with because he definitely doesn't have a crush on Liam, except, oh, wait, maybe he does. And as so often happens when theater kids are involved, drama ensues.
And that actually perfectly encapsulates the book. And I just wanted to share with you. You have to read it because you have to really get the full breadth of the Breakup List. But I have to share with you my favorite diss off of one of the Breakup Lists, which was Thinks in Crayon. Which I
Thank you.
is my favorite diss of all time now.
To my shame, but not that much shame, I once used that phrase to describe a coworker back at my old day job. And my fellow coworkers laughed and they're like, you can never say that again or you're gonna get reported to HR. Because I was like, I don't know why. I couldn't put my finger on why it's so mean, but it's very mean.
I read that and I laughed so hard I just started to cry. It was so funny for me. And then the other line that just got me was, use the word moist in a sentence.
I don't know, something about it. I just don't like that word.
No, I don't either.
And I like if a cake is moist, but like it means it's a good bake. But I don't know, just some words sound weird to me and I don't like them.
Yeah, turgid does that for
Yeah,
me.
oh,
That's
yeah,
a word that just
yeah,
should not be used.
the only thing that makes it worse is when people say it wrong and say turgid
Oh,
because they've only read it and never heard it spoken aloud. because they were a book reader like me as a child. You read lots of words and then say them all wrong.
Now I'm like, wait a minute, is it turgid or turgid?
Yeah, it is.
I don't know.
It is turgid. Yes.
Okay.
I always think it's a turd that's rigid.
Why is that not in this book?
I wasn't thinking about that word at the time.
Okay. Ooh, so you were a theater kid.
I was indeed. In fact, I brought my visual aid with me when I was in college, where I got my bachelor's in lighting design. I was awarded Best Emotional Breakdown of a Techie, which also has a little scream on the back of it. I'm pretty sure this is a spray painted bottle of liquor. It is empty, though, in case TSA asks any questions. So yes, I was a theater kid.
And how much of it informed, the story?
In a way, none of it, because the story was not anything that happened to me. I was so deep in the closet in high school. I was basically like the cask of Amontillado, like walled in. But many of the like little things that happen are just straight things that happened to me or to my friends in theater, either in high school or college. So in that sense, like the story is original, but the things that happen are very much not. They were just cribbed from real life.
So
And I, as
some
I
of
would
the
get,
stuff that the director character
yes,
relates,
yes,
maybe.
my high school theater teacher, my gosh, she got me through high school alive. She was amazing. But she did go to she went to college with a bunch of weirdos, and one of her classmates, I don't know if anyone's ever been to Kansas City. We have a lovely art museum called the Nelson Atkins, and on the lawn there are these giant shuttlecocks, like badminton shuttlecocks, but they're like sculptures of them. And my theater teacher had a classmate that stripped naked and climbed on top of one to center herself, and told us a story once, and it stuck with me for years. And I was like, "That's a great story. I'm going to use that in a book."
And he did.
I very much did.
So Jackson and his family are Iranian American, but they're very different from Darius's family, which I love. Darius the Great is not okay. What made you want to explore such a different diaspora? I hate that word.
no, I'm sorry.
Diasporic. You know what I'm trying to say.
I do, yeah. I think in a lot of ways, Jackson's family dynamic is a lot closer to mine, in that Jackson lives in a community that is predominantly white, predominantly Protestant. And so he's kind of the only Iranian around. And he defines himself by what he does. He's a theater kid first, and he's queer, he's Iranian, he's deaf, like second.
Mhm.
And so he doesn't really grapple with his Iranianness. He's like, whatever. Sometimes we have different food, and I get off on Nowruz because it's our holiday, and none of the white kids get to take it off. But he doesn't think about it that much. Whereas when I was writing Darius as a character was really grappling with what it meant to be Iranian and how he wanted to define himself. And I think I've gone through that myself at different points in my life. I've been Darius and I've been Jackson. And I think I was much more like Jackson in high school. And I didn't really start to understand my own Iranianness until I was like in my 20s. And in some ways, like I had to be out on my own away from my family to suddenly wonder what connections I did have to my family.
Right. Okay, I'm gonna say something kind of deep for me. I really relate to both Darius and Jackson because of that. Exactly what you said. Like Darius really kind of like he had to come to grips with being American enough, right? Being Iranian enough. And like I know that feeling, like of being like never feeling like I'm American enough or Asian enough, right? And I felt, that push and pull of two cultures. It's a really important part of our storytelling, our narrative, because it's it is a very specific experience for immigrant children, right? And at the same time, God, it's so nice to read a book where the kid doesn't have to worry about that. It's just American. And I love that, Jackson got to do that and still also be proud that he's Iranian and that he has to deal with his deafness also, right? Can you talk a little bit about writing a character that's so different in that way of having a disability?
Yeah, I thought long and hard about whether to do it in the first place. My philosophy when kind of writing outside my lane, so to speak, has always been that I need to make sure that I'm making more space than I take up. And I know I have kind of a large platform, larger than some, smaller than others. Um, but I wanted to make sure that if I was going to do it, I was doing it responsibly and that I was doing it in a way that would make people want more.
Mhm.
Uh, and I had made Jackson deaf because I have people in my life that are deaf and Iranian and deaf, and there are more and more books being written by deaf authors and about deaf characters, which is great. But there weren't a whole lot of them about queer deaf characters or diasporic deaf characters, and certainly not Iranian deaf characters. And so I really wanted to write this book for them. But I also knew I had to be responsible with it. So I've been around the deaf community all of my life. When I was very young, I got put in speech therapy. Turns out I just had gay voice, but they thought I needed speech therapy. So I've had deaf friends. In fact, one of my good friends when I was in college was a deaf scene designer. And so I felt like I had connections with the community that I could tell the story responsibly. I felt that I had access to research and works by deaf creators that I could draw from. I had access to an authenticity reader who told me when I was getting it wrong, told me when I was getting it right, told me. In fact, one thing that they said to me that really stuck with me is like, it's clear you've talked to a lot of people, and it's also clear that they either love you very much or don't like you very much, because they've filed off the sharper edges of their experiences for you. And I was like, oh, probably a little bit of both are true. Because yeah, like when something's bothering you, you don't always tell the people you love just how bad it is.
Right.
And so I really thought long and hard about that. But it was really important to me that it be a romance first and foremost, because it's not my role to tell a story about what it's like to be deaf and move through the world deaf. My role was to tell a story about someone falling in love that just happens to be deaf. And I think I landed pretty close to where I wanted to be, but the end of time will tell. And I can only hope that even if I did get it wrong, people will come up behind me and do it better.
Oh, I love that. I love that you said that. I also love that Jackson displayed his deafness in the way, well, I'm talking about Jackson like he's a real person, that you displayed him like in this beautiful way where I learned so much also about the deaf community. For example, one of the things he says is that he learned to sign with a Black family. And so when he spoke to white people, they said he signed with an accent. And I was like, wow, like I would not have that just the idea of that was so different to me. And I kind of loved, learning those things, but I also love the way you have when he hears dialogue, it's, something, something. Can you explain why you did that?
Yeah. In dialogue, Jackson wears hearing aids, and hearing aids are not a perfect replacement for, baseline human hearing. And so if people turn away, so he can't, match the sounds to their lips, if there's background audio, or if he's just tired, because when you wear hearing aids, your brain is working a lot harder to process audio. Sometimes he just doesn't catch things, and maybe he'll interrupt people and ask them to repeat, or maybe he'll just be like, whatever, I get the gist of what's going on. And so in the dialogue, it'll be like, oh, do you want to go something, something, later tonight?
I love that. I felt for me, it felt so real, and that would be how he kind of navigates the world in that way. So how about Liam, the love interest? How'd you go about crafting? Because he's such a hottie, but such a cutie and such a sweetie, right? Like all those things. There's no flaws, actually.
Oh, I mean,
Seriously, I'm thinking there's no
yes,
flaws.
he's too tall. He's too nice.
Too beautiful.
Yes, too beautiful. His eyes are too blue.
That's all in the book.
Yep. Being a former theater kid and getting my degree in theater, even though I studied lighting design, I was obliged to take acting classes. And one of the things I learned in acting classes was we talked about character formation, and we talked about like the psychological gesture, which if you ask me to explain it now, I can't. It's like a thing that a character repeatedly does. And the first seed of Liam was the psychological gesture of Jackson wears a lot of t-shirts and his tags are always sticking up, and Liam is always tucking them in for him. That was like the seed of his character. Is like, oh, he's kind of a caretaker, and if he really likes someone, he's going to go and make sure their tag isn't bothering them.
It's too sweet.
Right. And so a lot of his character grew out of that. I think his physicality, he's tall, he's a swimmer, maybe came from some high school crushes of my own. Gosh, I mean, anyone who is, I think, attracted to men or mask presenting people probably had a basic white boy they really, really had a crush on at some point in their lives. And I had legions of them because almost everyone in my high school was white. And so I definitely drew some from that. But I wanted to make sure, as I said, I wasn't allowed to give him that much of a subplot, but I wanted to make sure he, in fact, did have an internal life of his own. And a lot of that kind of came about organically, as sometimes being a foil to Jackson.
And I love them. They're so cute. But I really just want to talk about Bowie. Because Bowie is Jackson's best friend. And they are just, I feel like they stole the book and sometimes, and I feel like there's a Bowie story waiting that we want to hear. Even if it isn't a novel, I will take any little pieces of Bowie that you give us.
Yeah. So Bowie is Black, non-binary, aro ace, and is a child of deaf adults. So Bowie's family is actually the one that taught Jackson how to sign. And yeah, I wish I knew where Bowie came from. I just know that every rom-com needs a best friend. And my favorite rom-coms are always ones where the best friend is an integral part of the story, but also has a life of their own. They're not just a prop to make the main character's love happen, that they have wants and needs of their own. But I think Bowie just has lots of bits and pieces of many of my best friends in them. But they did end up being like really funny and kind of arch. In a way, in a very different universe, they were the Ron Swanson to Jackson's Leslie Knope, even though they both ended up nothing like Ron Swanson or Leslie Knope.
Kind of see it though.
I wanted them to have that relationship of, you're ridiculous, I disagree with everything you're doing, and I love you to death, and I will I will bury a body for you if we need to.
I see it. I absolutely see it. I actually think that characterization is so spot on. I think that might be why I love the pairing, because I love Leslie and Ron. I mean, they're just the perfect, right? Like platonic friendship.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. How about Jasmine? I really want to talk about Jasmine because I'm so mad at her. Like I mean, you will be too. You read this book, you'll be so mad. I still haven't forgiven her. Let's talk about Jasmine.
Oh no. So I am the brother of an older sister, and I think many people are. You love your sister to death, and also I think few people in your life can hurt you as badly as your sibling.
True.
Yeah, Jasmine is constantly in and out of love. She has a string of ex-boyfriends, and she insists that for her senior year she's going to focus on herself. So what does she do? A weekend she gets a crush on Jackson's friend Liam, and rather selfishly pursues it without pausing to think, A, is it going to be weird because you're my brother's friend, or B, is my brother crushing on this boy too? And I think people can be very selfish when they're in high school, and people can be very selfish if they feel unloved. And I think Jasmine is someone that has a bit of a hole in her heart, and she thinks that other people loving her can fill that. And over the course of the novel, she realizes that, in fact, the people whose love really matters is her family and her brother. And she makes some really bad mistakes along the way to that realization. And I definitely wanted her to be real and funny. And to me, even when she's being awful, she cracks me up.
Yeah.
She's a perfectionist, and she's an artist, and she spends hours and hours making these teeny tiny little clay boxes because she wants them to be just perfect. And it's been really interesting to see people's responses to her. And
Because she kind of like your sister?
I would say I would say her artistic temperament and her perfectionism I did borrow from my sister, and my sister even called me out. And, she's like, I started blushing as I was reading this. Like, are people looking at me right now? No, no one is looking at me. I'm reading a book, but I feel attacked. But I think you know, Jasmine's pettiness doesn't come from my sister. I mean, granted, when we were teenagers, we fought a ton, but
I am an older sister, and I was so petty. I am a petty queen.
Yeah.
So like I feel like my being angry, at Jasmine, also I completely understand.
I think that's what I think I've tapped into something that anyone who had an older sister is like, this is bringing up all sorts of traumas.
Yeah, no, but I think that the dynamic also is a little bit what's in the mix also is their parents' divorce also, right? And how much do we give away? Because I do think one of the interesting things you talk about is Jackson's abandonment issues, right? Which kind of is related to the breakup list. I thought that was deep. I really like that.
Well, thank you. It was completely accidental. I never know what I'm writing or why I'm writing it. I don't think it's too much of a spoiler. I think early on, Jackson says, he and Jasmine are children of divorce. They live with their dad and their stepmom, and their mom moved to Colorado. And yeah, I think, I was a teenager when my parents divorced. I had friends who were in elementary school when their parents divorced. I had friends who were, adults when their parents divorced. And it hits all of us differently if it's something you go through. And in this case, it definitely hit Jackson one way and it hit Jasmine a different way. And once I did understand that about them, I felt like I was able to dig in a little deeper and make those connections. I was like, oh, yeah, maybe Jackson just kind of has abandonment issues, and that's why he pushes everyone away all the time.
Right. Did we explain why he makes the breakup list?
I think so, that he was trying to help his sister get over
okay.
all of her exes.
Yeah.
Because, ride or die for his sister even when they fight. And
but the breakup lists aren't only his exes, though. Which
correct. He also just makes lists about anyone he doesn't like.
You can see how that can be problematic.
Indeed.
Okay, so I'm looking at my questions. What else did I not ask? I went off list so much. I don't know.
It's all good. That's the most organic and delightful conversations, when you leave the list behind.
This is true, but I do want to get to this question. Let's see. What projects do you have coming up?
Oh my goodness. So this July, my next picture book comes out. It's called Bijan Always Wins. It's about a little boy named Bijan who makes everything in his life into a competition that he must win, and really angers all of his friends in the process. And then in August, my very first adult romance comes out. It's I have to emphasize adult.
Yeah.
It's about people, they're nearly 40, they're drinking alcohol, and they're boning a lot. Like it's, it's going to make the Moms for Liberty very angry if they see it shelved in YA. So please don't shelve it in YA.
So that's your adult book coming out?
Yes, and it's called I'll Have What He's Having.
Yeah.
It's a foodie romance set in Kansas City, Missouri also. I think I'm in my Kansas City era.
Speaking of food, lots of food references always makes me happy. Like
Yes.
I love a book that makes me hungry and makes me want to try new foods, right? So
well, this book will make you want to try Velveeta shells and cheese, the true cuisine of Kansas City. It was so funny, actually. Earlier drafts of the book, there was a lot more cooking and a lot more baking. And I don't remember if it was Molly, my agent, or Ellen, my editor, who's like, where are they getting all this grocery money? Like, why do they always have ingredients to make more things? And I was like, okay, you're right. They have Velveeta shells and cheese instead. Like, that's in the pantry. That's accessible.
They actually spend most of their money on fruit because they're making smoothies all the time.
Exactly.
So fruit smoothies, that is the drink of choice in the book, which, by the way, also made me want a smoothie.
Oh, good.
But when you were in high school, what was your favorite musical play that you put on?
Ooh.
High school or college?
Okay. Oh. When I was in college, my senior lighting design project was an English translation of a weird French play called The Dispute. And if you ask me to this day what it was about, I'm not sure I could answer you. I feel like it was basically like the Blue Lagoon, but French. Like, what if we put these children into a forest alone and see if they start romancing each other? I mean, it seems very French to me. But the set was like entirely white, and then we like had cameras and projection, so it became a hall of mirrors, which was really challenging to light, but really cool. So I think that was really fun. And then, oh, it's so problematic. But we did no, but my senior year of high school, we did South Pacific. And I don't know that I like the musical, and I don't know that I like the story, but I think the non-racist songs in it are really fun songs that are really catchy. And like, it was my senior musical. I got to be what did I do? I was the lighting designer for that as well. I don't know. It was a fun production, even though in hindsight, it's not a great musical.
You know, it's so funny because I grew up in New York City, so we did Sing, right? And you know how
don't think-
Sing works?
No, I don't know what Sing is.
So like the
I thought you meant
great-
the DreamWorks animation movie with the singing competition. I was like, is there a musical based on that? They're making musicals out of everything these days.
So it's a musical, but it's the grades competing with each other. So it's
Oh.
freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, and it's so unfair because you know the freshmen are going to get the worst of it, right? And the seniors always win. But it is a very heated competition between the juniors and the seniors because the juniors always want to upstage the seniors, right? So like I have had some experience being forced into doing music part of. I have no talents. I can't act. I can't sing. I can't draw. So I can't do set designs. The only thing I could do is play piano and saxophone poorly. So I kind of got drafted into the orchestra part of it, right?
Okay.
So like that's how I I really saw Sing from that aspect of it, and it always was to me the best part of Sing was just watching the competition and then finding out who did the best job, right? And they were fantastic productions. I never knew what went into all the backstage stuff, and that was actually really interesting to read in your book, like that, the backstage stuff. Like it was actually quite interesting, and so. Oh no, I can't say that part. That would be a total like I would just give too much away. But there was a moment that broke my heart that happens to Jackson later on related to that stage management issue. And I was like, wow, this is like intense. Like I don't think I really ever realized how intense theater is.
It is. And in some ways, the techies are more intense than the actors. The actors can let it all out on the stage. The techies hold it inside, close to their hearts. Just keep building grudge after grudge after grudge. I'm not speaking from experience. Don't worry.
Did you ever like when you were in theater, like and you're backstage, did you ever feel like, I want to be front. I don't want to be back.
For the most part, no, actually. When I was younger, I had a lot of stage fright. And also I don't think I'm a very good actor. But I think there is a craving for recognition whenever you're an artist. And you don't necessarily need to get, to take a bow, but sometimes just the recognition from your fellow artists can be really nice. Like, every techie loves an actor that thanks them,
Right.
and hates an actor that treats them like dirt. And maybe they'll accidentally skip their scene by hitting the lighting cue go button too many times in a row. Oh no. Oh no. Or maybe they didn't get all the stains out of that costume. You just never know. There's lots of really petty things you can do to mess with an actor.
Oh, I love it. I love that petty.
It's just like well, no, it's very similar that like in publishing, like one of the first pieces of advice you won't ever get is never be rude to someone's assistant. Like it's just it will destroy your life. Same thing as an actor, you should never be rude to like the techs.
That makes perfect sense to me. And yet it seems to be a running theme that they're not always that most of the people who take more prominence don't seem to appreciate the people who work behind the scenes. Or is that just the breakup list thing?
I think it's you kind of need them to be jerks so that you can have an exciting book out of them.
Gotcha.
I would say in my life I've dealt with kind people much more frequently than rude people, though the rude people certainly stick out.
Yes, and make for better villains and stories.
Exactly.
So like, can you tell me about the writing process of this compared to Darius? Like, I know pandemic, I know romance, but the actual writing of the book.
Yeah.
How long? All that.
Yeah, Darius the Great is Not Okay was my first published book. I had written other things, but no one will ever see them. They were bad. They're hidden
Those two.
hidden
Yeah,
away.
those two.
But because it was my debut, I had no deadlines, I had no contracts. I wrote it by the seat of my pants. I overwrote it. I kept removing scenes. I rearranged things. I spent like 3 years working on it. I guess 2 years working on it before I got an agent, and then another like 6 months working on it before we sold it. So I just, in some ways, had all the time in the world
Right.
to really explore it, to get to know the characters. This, we sold it on proposal, which means I wrote like probably 10, 15 chapters of it, and then a synopsis for the rest, and we sold it. And then that immediately came with deadlines that I had to meet. But the process of writing it was extremely self-indulgent. I went way off my synopsis because every time I thought of some misadventure I'd had as a theater kid, I'm like, let me put this in the book. Let me put this in the book. And it came out about 120,000 words, and the final book is like 75,000. So it was like 50% too long. So there were lots of darlings that had to face the guillotine. But it was very, I think, even though I ignored the outline, having an outline kind of helped me know where I was going, and also having the structure of a romance, the tropes of romance, really guided me in writing it in a way that, with a lot of coming of age novels, there really is no formula other than that they come of age, and everyone's always coming of age anyway. Like, which age? Where are you coming from and going to? Like, and so in that sense, it was like very different because I did have the genre to guide me as I drafted the breakup lists, and that was really nice in a way.
So I have to ask, how did you diverge? Like, can you give us some examples of what really changed for you from conception to writing?
Yeah. The way that Jackson and Liam's relationship was supposed to happen was end up on a very different timeline than it did in this book. In early versions, they got together much, much sooner, and then there was a whole lot of like hiding it, like secrecy. And there is still some of that because, like, oh my gosh, I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to say that Jackson and Liam do end up dating. And so I know, right? It's like dating your sister's ex-boyfriend is a little messy. And there was a lot more time spent on that, like the secrets part of the novel. And that got cut way back so that it became a much slower burn, which I think ended up working really well. I think slow burn works a lot better in YA than a fast burn in a lot of cases.
I agree. And actually that takes me to another question. I was moderating an event, and it was for Lunar New Year Love Story, which I love, right?
Such a beautiful...
And Wynn talks about how, what is more romantic, the caress or the kiss?
I think it's the eye contact before either of those things happens.
Okay. No, not the eye contact. The very specific question.
Okay.
The caress, although actually it is kind of related, right? It's the eye contact that you make, and then you go in for the caress, and it's that anticipation.
It is the anticipation.
Right. I think that's what's so romantic. And I feel like there was a lot of anticipation in your book.
There was, and it needed it. It was lacking in those early drafts. There are also just lots of fun theater shenanigans. Like when I was in high school, one time after a show, someone just decided we should all go camp outside my theater teacher's house. And of course, the police got called when 30 teenagers in tents showed up. So then we had to decamp to a park. And so I was like, oh, that sounds like a great scene for a book. So I wrote it and then immediately had to just cut it because it did not advance the plot. I just really wanted there to be only one tent. So I'm really sad that didn't survive the editorial process.
I'm kind of sad too.
Right. I took all of the most important bits and put them in other places in the book, though.
So if you didn't have theater, what would have been your extracurricular activity?
Oh, I was also a huge computer nerd. In fact, I actually designed my high school's website back when, I'm old enough that when I started high school, my high school did not have a website. And by the time I graduated, it did have a website. And yeah, I spent a lot of time. I actually learned HTML programming. I don't know if anyone here is a computer nerd, but HTML 1.0. Like, that's what I learned. So that probably would have been, I mean, in some ways it was my after school activity or during school activity because I was good at computers and they ran out of computer courses for me to take. And they're like, just go and hang out in the technology office for an hour a day, and that's your computer class now. It's
I feel like computer classes, like when, well, I'm Gen X, so I'm really old. I remember, what was those things that you put into the computers?
floppy disks.
Floppy
Yeah.
disks. I
No.
remember them.
Yeah.
Like,
One time I spent a week with a vial of Goo Gone peeling old labels off floppy disks so we could reuse them. That was my classwork one day.
okay, so I'm old enough that, so when I graduated law school, I had a partner. This is a true story. Put her coffee cup because she thought that, you know, where the CD-ROM came out,
No.
she thought that was a cup holder. And she would put her coffee cup there. Funniest thing ever. And then she accidentally hit the close thing and it just, yeah.
Oh no.
Anyway, computers. Is it time to ask audience questions? Yes. So we are now at the Q&A part. We would like to open it up for questions. Yes.
Oh, Ede Shama Mubarak. So for those online, the question was how has writing about Iranian Americans and especially biracial Iranian Americans helped deepen my relationship with my own Iranian identity? Yeah. Um, in countless ways. It's really interesting that, you know, all of us are products of our families. And you know, every culture has its certain traditions, but then every family has its own twists on those traditions. And in fact, one of the most important traditions of Nowruz, which is a Persian New Year that just happened, happens every northern vernal equinox. So like 13, 14 days ago, is that afterward you do what's called Dido Bazdid, see and be seen, where you go and visit your relatives, starting with like oldest and then in descending order. And growing up in Kansas City, we didn't have any relatives at all, so I didn't know this was a tradition. Um, and in fact, I learned about this tradition while I was researching like what actually happens for Nowruz in Iran versus in the United States, because Darius's family celebrates Nowruz in Iran during the book. And I was like, wait, what's this thing? We didn't do that. Oh, we didn't have anyone to visit. So in some ways, even though I am Iranian and I know what my experience has been like, part of I think one of the responsibilities of writing about your own culture is to kind of examine what parts of your culture you're actually ignorant about or made assumptions about. And so I'm constantly discovering new facets of myself that either are connected with other Iranians or that are unique to my family, and that makes it really special. And sometimes I'll find things that are both, that are like, it's not universal, but oh, our family did that as well. And you know, it's easy in the United States to think of Iran as a monoculture, but it is in fact not. It's an ethnically diverse country and a regionally diverse country. Like my family comes from Yazd, which is basically the Texas of Iran. Yeah, exactly, the dessert capital of the world as well. But like there's an idiosyncratic dialect. There's like different cultural norms and then compared to say Tehran, the capital, which is much more cosmopolitan. And it's been really fun to find connection with people and also explore differences. Thank you.
I feel like the food has always, because in Darius, Persian food was, oh my gosh, right.
Food. I don't know if anyone is familiar with the cultural iceberg model. I always blank on the name of who posited it, but basically that, you know, most of what makes up a culture is below the surface of the water. Like 90% of an iceberg is below the surface, and then 10% is above. And that's things like music and language and food. And I think for a lot of diasporic people, food is like the number one way you can access your culture, because maybe you're trying to assimilate and not learning your mother tongue. Maybe maybe you're not listening to the music, but probably someone has been cooking you the food of your people before, and it's a really easy way to access that. And for some of us, it's the only way we get introduced to it or have access to it until we get old enough to seek it out for ourselves.
And also food is just, it's also comfort, it's home, it's family, it's so many wonderful things too. And I feel like it is that connection back to our culture that we all try to retain in some way, right? So
Exactly. I love a virtual question. Ooh, is this book in the same universe as my previous books? I think it could be. There is no direct overlap, but that doesn't mean that they don't exist in the same universe. But I think for legal reasons, no, they're not in the same universe. And by legal reasons, I mean every author lives in the dream that their movie will, or their book will be adapted into a movie. And if, a Hollywood company adapts your book, they basically own everything that's in your book. And so if you mention even a single passing reference of a character from a different book in the book that they option, do they own that as well? I don't know. A lot of people don't want to risk it. So in that sense, no, it's not the same universe. But also it still takes place on planet Earth. So yes. Yes and no. Yes, in the front row.
Stage manager. I was very excited to see that Jackson was a stage manager. Why did you decide to make him a stage manager instead of like a lighting designer like you were?
That's a really good question. So the question is, why did I decide to make Jackson a stage manager instead of a lighting designer, even though I was a lighting designer? Part of it is that stage managers are just much more active. They deal with the production from start to finish. Lighting designers get to white glove it a lot of the time. We get to swoop in the last 2 weeks of a show. Maybe you'll see a few rehearsals. Maybe you'll go to the production meetings, but maybe you'll just read the stage manager's notes because they were there. I also thought Jackson's personality just screamed stage manager to me. Most lighting designers I know are very relaxed, and Jackson is not relaxed. He's tightly wound and a little bit bossy, and just seemed like a stage manager through and through to me.
He just called you bossy.
Listen, I stage managed my fair share of shows, and I was like, oh, I think stage managing is giving me like a hernia. I think I need to switch to lighting design because I'm stressed all the time. So, yes, we love virtual questions.
So how did you decide to use that narrative?
Ooh, yes. So the question is, in the text, Jackson is constantly striking through his own narration. Why did I decide to do that? Part of this goes back to what I said earlier about like psychological gestures and how I use them as sort of seeds in building a character. As I was trying to find a voice for Jackson, I quickly hit on strike throughs because I'd already used for Darius. I'd used parentheticals for a different person. I think I used that for Hunter and Kizatel. I was like, okay, what other keys are on this keyboard that I can press? Or what other options are there in the format of my word processor? And I found strike throughs. And at first I was like, ha ha ha, this will be funny. And then the further in I got, the more I realized I was hitting on something, which is that queer people and people of color and disabled people are constantly self-censoring ourselves and filing off parts of ourselves to survive in society. And what had started out as something really funny to me ended up accidentally being deep. And I was like, oh no, this was supposed to be funny. And now it's kind of sad sometimes because Jackson will say exactly what he wants, and then he'll think he's not worthy of it, and he'll strike it through. And so it ended up being an opportunity for a lot of pathos.
I loved it, and I feel like that was your subconscious working because, like,
It was.
as I was reading that, I was like, oh, he's constantly self-censoring himself, and it's so funny and also so sad, right? Yeah.
I do think maybe we need to add like a note or something, especially to the advanced reader copies, because I had a lot of people being like, did your editor not like finish hitting delete on things? Like, is this just like the track changes were left on when it got printed? And then they're like, oh, never mind, it's a choice.
I think it's pretty obvious. As soon as you get in and you get his character, that it really did fit perfectly with his character. So I believe you when you said you wrote the characters first. Like they really came alive. Like I was thinking of Jackson as a real person. Sorry. More questions?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, perfect. Thank you. Yes. Oh, the question is, would any of the characters go see an ASL musical theater production? I think absolutely. In fact, if I know Jackson, and I invented him, so I guess I do. He might shove their stage manager down the stairs and take that job. I think he would really like that.
Any other questions? We already asked what you were working on, right?
We did ask what I'm working on next. What are you working on next?
I just finished the deadline, so my brain is kind of.
Oh, so you're fried.
I'm fried. Yes.
Fair.
Yeah.
I know that.
Actually I finished my deadline and I read this book, and it was actually like the perfect like palate cleanser from my scary middle grade horror novel where I killed things, and it was just such a beautiful thing to read. So, but yes, yeah, I finished the deadline.
Excellent. Congratulations.
Thank you, and I have to work on a sequel. So
Perfect. Oh no. Hopefully you get to sleep a little bit first.
yes, I will. Otherwise, my eye will not stop twitching. It is.
Fair.
It's right
Oh
there.
yeah,
See-
the
see
no,
it?
the deadline twitch.
Yes, the deadline twitch. It's
See
not
that.
stopped.
Well, thank you all
Well, yes,
so
thank
much
you.
for coming, and I think we're signing books after, so
Yes.
hang around. Thank you
Thank
all
you very
so much.
much.
Oh, now we have announcements.
Thank you guys so much. That was incredible. Thank you all for coming out. Thank you to our interpreters also for working so hard tonight. We appreciate it. We are now going to transition to the signing line. If you still need to purchase a copy of the Breakup List or Adib's other books or Ellen's other books, they are upstairs at the register. So you can do that before getting in line. And then if you are able to fold up your chairs and just put them to the side, that would be great. And then we're just going to take a minute, get a table out here, get some Sharpies out here, and then we will get this signing line on the road. Thank you so much. Woohoo!